Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live.
Thank you.
Okay, so Madam Chair, I am going to start by saying good evening to everybody. If you need interpretation services from English to Spanish, please select the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Spanish. Committee members, in the event that we have public comment in Spanish, you will need to select the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select English. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Si quisieran participar en español, en un momento van a aprender la función de interpretación y pueden navegar a la parte inferior de su pantalla donde va a aparecer un globo y ahí deben de seleccionar el español. Y para los miembros del comité, en caso de que alguien quiera prestar comentario en español, deben de navegar a la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccionar inglés. Gracias.
All right. Welcome everyone to this, our third Albuquerque Redistricting Committee meeting. My name is Catherine McGill. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have, I think it is 5:32. Our meeting is scheduled to last until 7:30 today. We're going to try to stay on track and make sure that we can end at 7:30. We do have a few things that we want to discuss on the agenda, beginning with approval of the two of the previous meetings minutes, March 9th and March 23rd. I'm hopeful that all the committee members have had an opportunity to see the minutes, and if there are individuals here from the public, know that there is a website where you can see the minutes from March 9th and March 23rd, our first and second meetings respectively. So if committee members have had an opportunity to review the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 9th and 23rd.
Madam Chair, I move, this is Mark Reynolds, to approve the March 9th and March 23rd minutes.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to anything that's in, or any additions or objections to what's in the meeting minutes? Discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote to approve the minutes. And Petra, can we just do it by a voice vote, or do you need to do a roll call?
We should probably do it by a roll call, but we don't quite have everybody here, so it should be a relatively quick roll call. We do have enough for a quorum though.
Okay.
I don't see anyone for District 1 on here yet. And so District 2, Committee Member Romero.
Sure. Madam Morris, Madam Chair, yes. Approval of minutes.
Thank you. Council District 3, Committee Member Quesada.
Yes.
Council District 4, Committee Member Reynolds.
Yes.
Council District 5, Committee Member Aragon. I can't see him on here yet. So Council District 6, Committee Member McGill.
Yes.
Or Chair McGill. Council District 7, Committee Member Kellerman.
Yes.
Council District 8, Committee Member Buckholtz.
Yes.
And Council District 9, Committee Member Pasco.
Yes.
Great, that passes on a 7-0 vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. So moving forward, on the agenda that we see, we have a follow-up from research and polling on the March 23rd committee discussion. Before we do that, I would like to just say thank you to research and polling. I thought the presentation last week was really stellar with all of the concept maps, and so we appreciate that. I also want to let members of the public know that that recording is available on our website. And so at this point, we do want to hear from research and polling on committee members' discussions or requests regarding some additional data about those concept maps, beginning with the socioeconomic data. Who will handle that from research and polling?
Chair McGill, that'll be me.
All right, you're on.
Thank you so much. Good evening, I guess, members and Chair McGill. If you don't mind, I'm going to share a little PowerPoint just to sort of keep us honest and keep us on track here with the things that we promised to follow up with you on. I'm going to go a little out of order from the agenda. Hopefully that's okay. This is all sort of one presentation. So I want to start with compactness. So we were asked at the last meeting to talk a little bit about the compactness scores for each of the plans that we've drawn. And what we sent to you in the meeting materials earlier this week and what is posted on the website are two measures of compactness. And I just wanted to take a few minutes just to talk a little bit about what those are and to caution you about sort of the interpretation of these, especially in the context of Albuquerque. So the two compactness measures that we presented to you are Polsby-Popper and REOC. There's more measures than this, but these are widely accepted. They're good measures. And we wanted to show you more than one measure also so that you can see that there's really no perfect measure of compactness. And often the best way to think about compactness is not as an objective measure, but a comparison across districts or across plans. Again, especially because of Albuquerque's municipal boundaries, which we'll talk about briefly in a minute. So Polsby-Popper just essentially is a measure of the contours of the district. Mathematically, what it is it compares the area of the district to the area of a circle that has the same circumference as the perimeter of the district. And so you can see this figure here. This circle has the same perimeter as the district itself. And so then you take the area of the district and divide it by the area of that perimeter, and that gives you the Polsby-Popper score. The REOC score is a little bit different. It measures essentially the dispersion of the district. And so mathematically what this is it compares the area of the district to the area of a circle, but it's the smallest circle within which the district can fit. And again, it's the area of the district divided by the area of that circle. And you can sort of see that represented in the bottom figure there. I just want to note, so the range for measures of compactness is from 0 to 1, with 1 being the most compact and 0 being the least compact. And so when we think about what is a good compactness score, it's important to think about sort of the context of the district and also the context of the measure that we're using. Definitely a higher score is better, but it depends on physical geography and how communities of interest are situated. And because there's different measures, each different measure is sensitive to different things, there isn't really one sort of objectively good score. So Polsby-Popper, I just want to note, is sort of sensitive to physical geography. So where we have a district following the contours of a river, Polsby-Popper may be low, but REOC might be high, just because they're measuring different things as a proxy for compactness. On the other hand, REOC is sensitive to the orientation of extremities. So where we have a district that, follows major roads, but has a precinct or two that juts out to encompass a community of interest, REOC is likely to be lower and Polsby-Popper might be a little bit higher. I also have the example of a coiled snake might have a higher REOC score than a straight snake. That doesn't mean necessarily that the coiled snake is more compact than the straight snake. If the scores on Polsby-Popper and REOC are different, that's not necessarily cause for concern. It's really about sort of being cognizant of what each measure is measuring and how and why. So these are the data that we sent to you with the current districts and then each concept and then the Polsby-Popper score and the REAC score. But I've also included the Albuquerque, sort of an outline of the Albuquerque municipal boundaries without any districts on it, so that you can see that the boundaries of the city by themselves, without any districts at all, are pretty non-compact. There's a lot of contours around that's going to drive down the Polsby-Popper score. And then there's pieces jutting out in the west and sort of in the south there that are going to drive down the REAC score. And there's no real way to separate the compactness issues that result from the municipal boundaries from those that result from how the district has been drawn. So that's just something to keep in mind. What you see here are the average scores for all the districts in each of those concepts and including the current districts. So there is some utility in comparing plans against each other for both types of compactness scores. But just keep in mind that the objective measures are really affected by just the shape of Albuquerque itself. So you can see that, D on both Polsby-Popper and REAC is a little less compact than the other districts. A, B, and C are relatively compact compared to current districts. And E is sort of somewhere in between D and A, B, and C. So we sort of feel like this compactness measure has sort of limited utility for reasons stated, but because it was a request, here it is. One of the other things we were asked for is to compare how much population has been moved from the district they're in today to a different district under each plan. And so we've created a percentage score for each concept that shows the percentage of the total population of Albuquerque that is in a different district from the one they're in today under each concept. And so you can see we've talked about that as sort of a least change plan. It moves the least amount of people, 5.8%. Concept D moves the most folks, and that's definitely that's the one that made a bunch of changes to the east side of the city. And so you can see then B moves about 6.3% of the population, D moves a quarter of the population. So you have this already and you can go through this. And then we were also asked about, could we provide turnout data and how turnout varies across the city and in each district. We got together and looked again at the resolution that authorizes this committee. And in section 4E, it says the committee shall not use election or voter registration data when considering district boundaries. And we interpreted that as including data like turnout. And so that's not something that we have provided in this presentation today because of the language in the resolution. But we do have data on sort of socioeconomic issues. And what we have decided to show you today is comes from the Social Vulnerability Index, which is sort of a data set created by the CDC that uses census data from 2018 that uses the American Community Survey. And this is compiled at the tract level. So the tracts, as we talked about before, don't correspond perfectly to precincts or districts. They're a little larger than precincts and they're smaller than districts. But we've done some visualizations that I'm going to show you in just a second that hopefully will give us a sense of sort of which tracts are most vulnerable. And then you all can sort of use that however you see fit in terms of evaluating plans and drawing districts. So there's several sort of pieces of the Social Vulnerability Index. I've just pulled out the socioeconomic status piece because I think it's the most relevant. We can talk about what the other pieces are and if you'd like to see that also. But I do think that this is the best data for our purposes. So this is an index of socioeconomic status that includes folks below poverty, unemployment, income, and then folks without a high school diploma. And so it basically ranks all of the census tracts on each of these measures. And so higher rankings is more socially vulnerable and lower rankings is less socially vulnerable. And so what I'm going to show you now is that we've essentially put this Social Vulnerability Index on a map. And this right here, hopefully you can all see this. So what we have here, this is without districts. I just wanted to sort of give you a sense of what these look like. And I've put sort of a mask of the Albuquerque municipal boundaries over the social vulnerability index so that we can sort of zero in on which tracts are actually in the city limits. But I'm gonna just turn that off really briefly. And so you can see that, you know, the tracts don't line up perfectly even with the municipal boundaries. And so what we're looking at here is the darker colors mean more higher levels of that social vulnerability. So, you know, higher levels of poverty, unemployment, lower levels of income, lower levels of educational attainment. And so what we can see is that over here in the South Valley is more vulnerable, especially this is one tract, but it's essentially the Pat Hurley and Alamosa neighborhood here. Also here in Bareilles and South Broadway is particularly vulnerable. You can see pretty clearly highlighted here, this is the International District, this is Wyoming, and this is Eubank. And so you can see even east of the International District up into Eubank is very vulnerable. And then this right here is sort of Montgomery and Osuna. And I think we can all sort of think about when you get off the freeway here, this is I-25. There's a bunch of apartments and stuff in there, and that's also a tract that's particularly vulnerable. So you can sort of see what this looks like citywide. And then what we've done to sort of give you a sense of what this looks like in the districts, I'm going to bring up the current districts. Oh, sorry. No, I'm going to bring up concept A. Sorry about that. Is we've overlaid the districts then on top of this to give you a sense for, you know, how this sort of, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, how this plays out in each district. And so you can see this is concept A again, and this is that lease change plan. And so you can sort of see how the tracks are shaded underneath the districts, but you can still pretty clearly see where the districts are. So this was our sort of solution to the socioeconomic data. If this is something that you feel like would be useful to you and sort of achieves the objectives that you were looking for with these data, we'd be happy to produce these maps for each of the concepts and get those out to the committee. We just wanted to sort of check in and see if this would be an appropriate way to look at the data.
Madam Chair, Brittany, first I just really want to say thank you for doing this work and putting this together. I do think this is valuable. It's a good visualization. Seeing the darker and lighter areas and having that overlaid into existing districts. A step further as we go along might be to do the same for different concepts. And I think as we discuss and narrow down which concepts are more viable or we want to lean into, that becomes work that we can decide is necessary or not. So I think this is quite useful. I just want to say I appreciate your work on this and the diligence to especially try to fit what is essentially census tract data into a map that is not broken up by census tracts. Also, when we get to a point where we're looking at how to distribute some of this vulnerability, mapping that and having some kind of mechanism and dialogue with you to map out and model some of those scenarios. Something I was thinking about, as well as how to preserve communities of interest while distributing some of the vulnerability in the city. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Member Kellerman. We had Member Romero, and then following that, Member Buckles with their hands raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Brittany, thank you for the presentation. Great information. I think will be hugely helpful. And just so I'm clear, because this question has been posed to me by some constituents, but when you say turnout, that's performance, in other words, because that's what people are asking about, that that isn't apples to apples across sort of ethnic lines, communities of interest, and so on. That would implicate partisan information, and that we're staying away from that, but per the resolution, right?
So Madam Chair, Member Romero, I think performance and turnout are a little bit different. So turnout is just like the percentage of eligible voters or registered voters that came out to vote, not necessarily how they voted. But we feel like we're precluded from any of that sort of election data, whether it's turnout or sort of partisan performance.
Okay. And I may take that issue up on performance later on in the conversation, but I just wanted to echo what Mr. Kellerman said. I think this is hugely helpful information. So thanks for your presentation.
Member Buckholz?
Yeah, just a technical question. Do the census tracts have more or less comparable population numbers in each one of them?
They have, I'm sorry, Member Buckholz, they have more population generally than precincts. They tend to be
No, that's not my
Oh.
question. If you take census tract X and census tract Y randomly, do they have more or less the same amount of population, or do they vary? And are the census tracts described geographically? In other words, I'm trying to say, do all of the, you showed about, I don't know, 50 census tracts. Do they all have more or less the same population, or is it random?
Michael can help me answer this question. I think there's a range in which a census tract can be too big and has to be split, but I'm not totally sure. Michael?
To be honest, I'm not really sure exactly what those standards are, but I think the population does vary.
Yeah, okay. Because, I mean, the fact that a census, the fact that a census tract is very large and may be skewed one way or the other may have more or less meaning depending on the amount of people who live in that census tract as opposed to other census tracts.
We can look into that and get back to you. I think they're relatively comparable.
Yeah, it would be easier if they were, but I
Yeah.
just couldn't figure that out from what I was looking at.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely do some research and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you
Good
so much.
question. Mhm.
And Brittany, thank you again for the presentation. I'm wondering, I'm very interested in making sure that we use plain language for the public and making things relatable in terms of this redistricting process. Could you explain compactness so that someone who reads and understands at a 5th grade level could understand it and reiterate it to someone?
Sure, absolutely, Chair McGill. So compactness is basically how a district is sort of oriented around a center point. That wasn't good. I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
It's basically, does it look like a regular shape? Like how close, essentially, how close does it look to a circle? Does it branch out more than a circle? Is it sort of thinner than a circle? Basically, all compactness measures compares a district to a circle as sort of like the most perfect compact shape there is.
And we get that. I think we get that. What I'm aiming for is, why does this matter in redistricting? What's the reason for these ratios?
Sure. So compactness is one of the major principles of redistricting. And the idea is that you don't want to draw districts that are sort of sprawling and that are hard for people to understand, what district they're in. And it's hard for representatives to sort of cover the whole district. So it's an important general principle of redistricting. On top of that, in your resolution, you all are required to draw compact districts. And specifically, your language talks about not having to minimize geographic extremities.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions regarding Research and Polling's presentation?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just want to.
Brian Sanderoff, hold on one second. I see Brian Sanderoff's hand was raised, and so Brian, will get you in after this. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. So I wanted to get back to the question about census tract size real quick. Just directly from the census website, they say generally census tracts have a population between 1,200 people and 8,000 people.
Right.
and the size does vary. So I just wanted to answer that question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Brian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I too was going to clarify the tracks, but also, Madam Chair, Brittany, can you pull up your track map again? I just want to point out one thing that you might have been curious about. And Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong, or Michael, if I'm about to say. Notice that white area in the middle of the International District. That's actually the state fairgrounds.
Well,
And so it's not as if that's a very wealthy area within the International District. There's just no data there, and that's the state fairgrounds.
And
not
it's
a part of
also
the city.
not in the city limits.
Right.
Right. Right. So you'll see that in all the district maps that area is blank because it's not in the city.
Thank you very much. Any other committee members have any questions? Don't see any. Thank you all so much for those follow-ups to our requests from the last meeting. And we are about to go into public comment, but before we do that, I want to find out from staff how well we've done in following up on the committees and the public's request related to communications and getting the word out about what we're doing. Would it be possible to get a report on newsletters and other things of that nature that have been done, either Petra or Julian?
Good evening, Madam Chair. Yes, committee members. So since the last meeting, we have got the email distribution list established through MailChimp. The starting content for the list is all of the committee members, plus everyone who has joined a Zoom call so far. When we set up the Zoom calls and people join, we get to collect their email addresses, and then anyone who's written into us. There's now a button on the website for someone who's just interested and maybe doesn't want to attend a meeting to join the list. Emails will be going out on the Fridays before the committee meetings with the agenda to this email list, just as it goes out to you guys to let the public know that the latest materials and agenda is up on the website. We did update the website with the updated communications plan after the last meeting and the minutes as well. We have event pages on the website. We haven't done a media advisory, but there has been a request for that. So prior to the next meeting and on those same Fridays before each meeting, we'll be sending out media advisories to the media in general. They do follow the events pages, but that might draw their attention a little bit more to this. We have sent the website to the Office of Neighborhood Coordination so that it can go out with the ONC newsletter and on their Facebook page. We have a large number of neighborhood associations in the city, and so it's a good way of getting out to kind of more ordinary members of the public. Julian, is there anything I've missed on that one?
Madam Chair, Petra, no, I don't think you missed anything, but I would just like to reemphasize for people that are following and want to get updates, please go to the website, cbq.gov/2022 redistricting. That's numeral 2022 redistricting. And at the very top, you'll see the ability to subscribe to the MailChimp mailing list that Petra was just talking about. And we would really like to build up that distribution list so people can get up-to-date information, especially right before meetings. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Petra.
Thank you. We do have, I see a couple of hands raised for public comment. And but before we do that, I'd like to just say that I will bring up the comments that we received in writing. I see that one of the members who is from community, also sent us something in writing. So we could start there in public comment with that hand that's raised from, help me out, Julian. Sorry.
No problem, Madam Chair. It'll be Michael Sperberg McQueen.
Yes, so Mr. McQueen, if you would like to ask your question and know that we did receive your written comment.
And Michael, you are now a panelist, so you can feel free to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
And I'd like to, before you do that, if we could show on the screen the principles of redistricting. I'd like to ask the public to please refer to that as you're making your comments so that we can make sure that the what we're talking about is relevant to the process.
Michael, you may proceed with your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would turn my video on, but my machine refuses to recognize my camera at the moment. There are 3 points. There are 3 points I would like to make if I have time. First, I observe that from the research and polling report in previous meetings, the West Side has grown a lot faster than the East Side. And while past experience is not a perfect predictor of future performance, it seems likely that the West Side will continue to grow faster than the East Side. So I wonder, I'd like to suggest respectfully that the committee consider looking for plans in which the West Side districts are a little under the ideal rather than over the ideal, so that if they continue to grow faster than the rest of the city, we don't end up at the end of 10 years with the kind of disproportion that is visible now in District 5. The second point is I'd like to thank you for the committee and the staff for the efforts you've made at openness. I'm glad that you have adopted District R. I wonder actually where the effort with District R is. Is District R open for business yet with Albuquerque redistricting or not? But at the same time, I would like to observe that if it is possible, it would still be useful for the committee to publish shape files of the precincts and partial precincts out of which the districts are made, together with the demographic information. That would make things a lot easier for people who want to do things with systems, with geographic information systems that can't be done in District R. And the third point is I have a couple questions about the concept maps. I have been trying to recreate them in a geographic information system, and there are points in maps C and D that I am unable to replicate because they seem to be showing district boundaries running in places where there are not now precinct boundaries. And I'm wondering if those are just slips in district in those two maps, or whether I have the wrong precinct boundaries. I can explain if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Sperberg McQueen, for your comments. And as I say, we do see your written comments as well. And my understanding, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, that District 3 is not going to be available until April 18th. We apologize. We did say that we would have it available within this 2-week period, but you know, things happen, and so it will be available on April 18th. Please correct me if that is incorrect. And then we are working to get the shape files up on the website that Julian mentioned, and it should happen early tomorrow, so that individuals may manipulate those shape files. We did promise to do that at the very beginning, out of a desire to be as transparent as possible. On your questions about what's missing in those concept maps, I'd ask research and polling to answer if you could.
Yeah, Chair. This is Michael from Research and Polling. Just wanted to really quickly address the precinct boundaries and with respect to the city limits. One of the challenges that we have is that the city limits don't necessarily follow precinct boundaries. So there are many precincts throughout the county that are split by the city limits. And so in such a case, the precinct lines and the city limits lines will not line up perfectly.
Sorry, yes, your presentation at the first meeting made clear how to deal with that. So that's actually not my issue. In map C, the boundary between District 6 and 7 is shown as following Lomas all the way east to the Coronado Freeway and then the freeway down over to Eubank. And that last bit of Lomas is a precinct boundary in the status quo, but not in the new precincts. And in map D, the boundary between District 6 and 2 is shown as following I-25 all the way down past the airport and the University Golf Course with a long shard of District 2 on the west side of I-25. But the precinct files I have from the Secretary of State don't show the precinct boundary running there. Neither of these affects any voters because in the one case, it's a Ford dealership, and in the other case, it's, as far as I know, waste uninhabited land. But it made me worry.
Mr. Sfaber McQueen, we are going to be providing those shape files. Would that ease your worry?
Thank you. Yes, that will, the shape files will almost certainly answer my questions definitively. Okay. Thank you.
That should be available to you tomorrow. If that doesn't happen, please send us another email and we'll be certain to respond to that.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we did have another member of the public write a written comment who is with us online, Maureen Scourin, who was also requesting the shapefiles. So again, they should be available tomorrow. Another comment that we had from a member of the public was relative to District 6 and just working to find that a committee member urging this committee to keep the Nob Hill neighborhood association area intact in District 6. Nob Hill's boundaries are Girard to the west, Lomas to the north, Washington to the east, Garfield Zuni to the south. Nob Hill is a community of interest that should not be split. Nob Hill has an active neighborhood association and is comprised of several historic districts that have common interests and needs. The New Mexico House of Representatives 2022 redistricting returned Nob Hill to one House district, that's District 18, reversing the 2012 redistricting that split Nob Hill into two House districts. Map Concept E excludes the northwest corner of Nob Hill from District 6. I urge the committee to reject Map Concept E. So I wanted to read that into the record to let the community know that we did receive that, and we will take that into consideration as we move forward. I think those are all of the public written comments that we received. Petra and Julian, correct me if I missed anything.
Madam Chair, no, that was all. I will just add that we do have someone else that had their hand raised for public comment. If you would like to go back to
yes, I would like to go back to public comment, whomever the next community member is who would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have WSer. Please feel free to turn your video on and unmute yourself and provide your comments.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much. One feedback point in terms of communications, neighborhoods in general public really didn't receive word of the committee being formed and starting their meetings, except for this meeting, which is the third meeting. So it would have been nice to know from the get-go, especially so we could have provided information or recommendations or tried to volunteer or something for the committee if there were other interested people. That's not a comment on any of the current committee members, just a general statement of the openness aspect. The other comment is specifically related to the availability of District R, and that there, and I want to make sure that the committee is supporting a link or a means for citizens to submit concept maps as well that will be considered, particularly among maps that may or may not be forwarded to the full council. But the public absolutely should have the opportunity to create maps on District R and have them published on that website as well. That's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do want to apologize for any lack of transparency that may have existed. We apologize that you did not know. We are working very hard as a committee to make sure that this is an open and transparent process relatable to the public and that as many people as possible find out. So we do now have a communications plan that's on our website. We would highly recommend that you go there. And if you see anything that's missing, please let us know. We'd be happy to add it. We do now have information going out to all the neighborhood associations, and we have an e-newsletter that people can sign up for. It will be in the minutes for how you might subscribe to that newsletter. And I believe it's just resident on the website. Julian, could you give us the website address again and tell me if that's correct?
Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. And the website is cbq.gov/2022 redistricting. And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, can I just ask the public commenter just to identify themselves just for the record as well, please?
Yes, and so all we have on your Zoom account is WSER. So if you could give us your first and last name, that'd be great. Do you need to bring her back up as a panelist? So that
Madam Chair, I didn't remove her. It looked like maybe she may have left because I don't see her as a panelist anymore, and I did not remove her, so she must have left the meeting.
Okay. For future, I will make sure that panelists or members give us their first and last name. Looks like on the panelist, member Buckholz, did you have a comment, and can it wait until we conclude public comment? I think you're on mute.
Member Buckholz, yeah, you are.
You're on mute, member Buckholz.
All right, excuse me, yes. No, I was going to comment to the presenter, giving her my apologies and maybe, telling her what's happened so far and all of the work we still have to do. But if she's not present with us anymore, I don't need to say anything more.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to speak? I don't see any hands raised at this point. So thank you for members of the public. We do have more people this time than last. And we do want to, and member Buckholz, you can, read into the record all the things that we have done and all the work that we have still to do when we get to committee discussion, which we are at now. And before we do that, I wanted to take a straw poll if members have had an opportunity to look at the concept maps, just to sort of have a preliminary starting point to see where we are with what we think about those about those concept maps. This is not a vote. I asked Julian to put together a poll so that would give us a starting point for our discussion today. So Julian, if you would put that up. So the question is, of the 5 concepts currently drafted, which is your preferred concept? These this is anonymous, and we just would ask you to tell us what you think. I just would like to see where we are and where we need to get to. So if members would take an opportunity to tell us what you think, we'll be able to show that in this meeting. Did everyone see it pop up on your screen? And once you submit your answer, it should tell you poll submitted in the top right of your screen. And if everybody is submitted, you'll give me a thumbs up.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. Do we want to make it, this is open to the public and the committee members, is that correct?
So right now, I think the way that we did it, Jillian, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's one that's just for the committee members. Is that correct, Jillian, or was it for both committee and public?
Madam Chair, yeah, I believe that the way it's set up is it's for both attendees, the public, and panelists, committee members.
Okay, so then for those attendees, if you would also like just to give us some idea of what people are thinking about what has been presented by research and polling, we'd also like you to participate for those members that are on the call. So we'll take another minute to allow members, attendees from the community to weigh in, if you will. You want to put it up again?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's still up and open. So
Okay.
people can still submit their answer.
And if you can tell me, you know, do you think everybody is answered at this point? And should we go to discussion? Just give me some guidance on that.
Sure. Madam Chair, it does look like the answering has kind of slowed down. We just got one other one.
Okay.
But it looks like it has slowed down. If you're okay with me just ending it, and I can share the results.
Yeah, and right before we do that, it looks like W. Sir has rejoined us, has her hand up. And so if you did want to just elevate her to a panelist just so we can get a name, first and last name for the record. It looks like you're there. We just were hoping to get a first and last name for the record, and Member Buckholz wanted to let you know that we take your comments seriously.
The map is, or the poll is still showing. Do you want me to wait until that's finished?
You can just give us your first and last name.
Just put it as Ms. Ward, W-A-R-D. And I do want to object to the poll because there's not a none of the above option.
Apologies for that. We did not have a write-in option. So we will take note of that. And as we move forward, I think Julian can, in the post poll that we do at the end of this discussion, he can add a none of the above. So thank you. Member Buckholz, if you would like to make your comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Ms. Ward that I do take the comments seriously, and it's good, I think, for you to know that we have a lot of work to be done and that no decisions have been made. I don't know whether the meetings that we've had in the past are on tape or not. I thought I understood that they would be available on the website, and I urge you to look at it. Particularly the meeting, the second meeting, where research and polling made a very good and detailed report on the work that they've done in regard to the presentation of the concepts and the limitations of that work on the ultimate decisions of our body. But I'd urge you to keep coming and keep watching what we're doing. And I think you can catch up pretty well by looking at the website and watching those earlier meetings. And as I say, we're very far away, I think, still from making final decisions and from not considering comments from the public.
Thank you, Member Buckholz.
May I respond to that?
I will give you 1 minute to respond, and then we're going to move on to committee discussion.
Okay, just very quickly. It's like I have another meeting, so I'm going to zip off again, so I won't be able to vote for none of the above if there's a follow-up poll. But just in terms of like having a poll this early, looks to me like you're trying to already focus in on a choice without the public input. I think that's why it's very important for the public to be able to submit maps on District R. And I
thank you
won't
very
take
much.
any more of the committee's time. I won't take any more of the committee's time.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Ward. We appreciate you, and we will be allowing the public to respond on District R. All right. We're going to go to committee discussion right after we show the results of the poll that we just did. And before we do the follow-up poll, we will add none of the above. Julian, can you show what we got? Thank you. Petra, if you could call for committee discussion of the presentation that we've heard today, and anything that we would like to talk about related to the principles of redistricting, if you put those back up, and we can talk about where we are, having talked to our constituencies about what we're seeing in the process, and trying to do it in terms of making it relate to the principles so that it's contextual and we can stay on track. Petra, if you'll call the committee for comment.
Madam Chair, yes. This will go slightly out of order so that, per your suggestion, so that we get a little bit of a different mix of voices in a different order. And so we'll start with District 9 and hear from committee members Pascoe and Stull.
Okay, Madam Chair, first off, really a lot of interesting and good work done by the research and polling company. I think we need to look at, there were options on the table for significant redistricting, significant changes within the east side. And we want to look at those in terms of where that's going to position us in the future. Are these districts, are new district lines going to hold for a long time? Can we draw new district lines that focus that divide along the major streets? Can we anticipate, like one of the public commenters indicated, can we anticipate future growth or decline in that district as compared to the average of the city? So just a lot of thinking to do. That's all I have to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, this is Member Stull, and I would just like to add that I think that the additional metrics that were given tonight with the compacting and the other data just add to the data-driven dialogue that we need to have on this. And I think that further helps our discussion, especially with the different options that we have. And I think specifically, and I would like to emphasize again, just as you did, this is not a decision on an option. It's just a feeling of where we're looking at now with these options. But I think that with this additional data, it made my feeling looking at where we're at, and I said the same thing last time at the end of our meeting, that the option that creates the lesser impact for the whole city is option A. That doesn't mean that we're going to go with option A, but that has the less impact on every district within the city. And so looking at the compactness and the other metrics that we looked at today, those other data that we received tonight still support option A as one of the better options. And so I think my bottom line is what I'm saying is that while looking at other issues, we still need to keep this as a data-driven dialogue as we go along, and this was very helpful. But what I would say that looking at option A is that the thing that I have not seen with that, and a discussion that we probably need to have at another date, as I looked at these before our meeting tonight, is I don't understand if there are impacts to communities of interest with option A. And I would like to hear from the other districts if there are impacts to communities of interest that I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stoll.
District 7. So we'll go 17531 and then 8642. So District 7, committee members Kellerman and Bergmans.
Thank you, Director Morris. Madam Chair, I wanted to first say I appreciate the repetition of the phrase data-driven dialogue. I feel like that's our 6th principle for this committee and something we can carry forward. A big part of that is having the data, and part of data, which is a sort of raw form of information, is how we're able to interpret it. Something I saw from the good work by Research and Polling is an overlay with census tracts that show the vulnerability index, higher ranking and lower ranking census tracts within existing council districts. What is not clear is how to take action, how to interpret that beyond noticing which districts carry more vulnerability burden and population than others. There's an alternative viewpoint here to also note concentrations of wealth, which are correlated, and this may be something that skirts the Section 4E restriction. There's a strong correlation with increased income and increased voter behavior or voter performance. So voter turnout, looking at concentrations of wealth and engagement from that, especially middle and upper class residents of Albuquerque. How can we more equally distribute the vulnerable populations and district areas with higher ranking in terms of the vulnerability index as explained by Research and Polling? So getting down to that, that's the start. That's a question, that's an open question. And we need the data to drive the dialogue on that question. The census tracts are a good start. The visualization is a good start. But how do we now take that's what's been visualized and come to some kind of estimated numbers? The census tract information gives us enough to add those mappings, those colorations across districts. What would it look like to either redo, iterate, or create new concepts based around equal distribution of vulnerability? And to add another layer, what does it look like, also to District 9's point, what does it look like to include communities of interest and preserve existing communities of interest? Both the ones that were noted in the initial presentation and the one that came in public comment, the Nob Hill District, others that have been contributed by the public or other committee members as they take their turn speaking. So I'd like to propose those two concepts or those two layers be included in a new round of concepts and the iteration. I know this is more work, but it really is needed. It's never been considered before. Socioeconomic data is intensely tied to voter behavior and performance. It's both tied to inclusion and representation. We see inequality of infrastructure across the city, and what districts have strong voter turnout often have louder voices. There's an unequal representation of voting populations, and we need to look at socioeconomic stance from both populations of vulnerability and concentrations of wealth. So I leave it to the discretion of research and polling to make some estimates here. The Gini coefficient comes to mind. I know that's a more advanced variable, but how can we get to some kind of estimate and have some iterations on concepts that take into account equal distribution of vulnerability and splitting up some of these concentrations of wealth? Madam Chair and committee, thank you for this dialogue.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if I missed this when we were going through the presentation earlier, but in terms of the voter turnout, I think we're a little bit limited on that one. The resolution establishing the committee has the following information. The committee, section 5E states, the committee shall not use election or voter registration data when considering district boundaries. Wouldn't voter turnout be considered election data? And so I think we might have a limitation on including that, but I believe can do the other mapping layers that Committee Member Kellerman just discussed. If there's a different perspective on that, we can certainly look into it, but that was my initial understanding of the question on voter turnout.
We did discuss it earlier.
Okay, good, sorry.
In research and polling's presentation.
Right.
And so then the question is about whether or not we can focus on concentrations of wealth based on these concept map boundaries. So we'll line that out as a question that we need to discuss further. But if we could just, Member Kellerman, continue on, we'll get back to it if we can.
Yeah, if Madam Chair, if I could just clarify, I recognize section 4E, and I was referring to the connection between voter turnout and socioeconomic demographic information. So correlations there between class and actual voter performance in municipal elections. We don't have to look at election data. That's simply a correlation and an observation using other data.
Thank you for that clarification. Let's continue.
Yes, District 5, Committee Member Robert Aragon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair, I'm sorry. It's been a long day for us. Anyhow, I just appreciate the presentation of research and polling. I certainly understand and appreciate the information that they're providing us. I'd just like the public to know that there's been no decisions made. We're just compiling this information at these early stages. I think every member is ready, willing, and able to listen to any suggestions from the public as we come closer to drawing some new districts. I do like the idea of making sure that the communities of interest, particularly in the west side, remain intact to the extent possible. But more than anything, just want everyone to know that this is going to be, as we've said before, data-driven, and that we are open to any suggestions from the general public. We need all the help we can get to make this right. So thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
District 3, Committee Members Quesada and Hernandez.
Thank you. Thank you, Research and Polling, for the data. It's very helpful. This was one of my concerns at the last meeting. As you know, I was very passionate about some of the concepts that were presented, and I implored the committee to go take a drive through some of these committees or communities that we were discussing. I'm a little bit more relieved at this meeting, knowing kind of where your thoughts are at as far as these concepts. I'm relieved that the majority selected concept A. As you know, that's the least impactful to my district. And so, yeah, I'm not feeling as concerned this meeting.
Thank you, Member Quesada.
Madam Chair, Member Hernandez here. I think that there are a lot of really good points that have been brought to the table, and I believe wholeheartedly that that data is definitely keying in terms of helping us to determine things. But I'd like to take a step back from that to maybe a time when these data points weren't available, and back to a time when it was the communities of interest, and compactfulness, and all these. We look at Albuquerque as a whole, right? And we take into consideration, what the population is going to be in the next 10 years, right? And where that growth is going to happen in the next 10 years. And maybe looking at it, from that standpoint of how can we, create these districts that are going to reflect the growing population, right? And of course, data does play into all that. But as Member Aragon said, I think that we really need to be concerned about keeping our communities of interest intact, especially on the west side. And to Member Quesada's point, really simply getting out and doing the good old fashioned driving around in the neighborhoods and identifying with who they are, and what those neighborhoods are. And the concern is to not split those communities of interest and keep them intact, just based on the histories of those communities of interest. And so, again, the data is going to be key, but I would just ask our community members to look at those things. I would ask that our members of this committee would also take some of those things into consideration as we move along this decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
District 1, committee members Segura and Dan Aragon.
Madam Chairwoman, my philosophy is basically that I want to see the data. I definitely would like to do that. And as Member Kellerman spoke, I would also like to see the socioeconomic data as we prepare the plans. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at considering for District 1. Other than that, I'm not going to be verbose and repeat a lot of things that people have already said. So I'm going to end it at that point, unless Dan Aragon has something to add.
I don't have anything new to add at this time.
Thank you, District 1 members.
District 8, committee members Buckholz and Powers.
Yes, thank you for all the good comments. I'm not going to have too much to say here other than what I had said at the last meeting, and to reiterate that more information is better than less information. Having said that, I'm not sure that I'm going to be looking for too much change here, and suggest that the advocates of change will have a persuasiveness factor as to why matters need to be considered. But I think we need to listen to everybody more, and then come to conclusions that make sense for the community as a whole. So I'll stand by comments that I made last time, sort of give those cautions as to what I may be looking for. Let the rest of the group speak here this afternoon.
Thank you, Member Buckholz.
Madam Chair, Council District 6, and that will be yourself, Madam Chair, Chair McGill.
I'll hold my comments for last and we'll go on to District 4.
Okay, great. Council District 4 then, that will be Committee Member Reynolds and Latham.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I really like what research and polling brought today with the socioeconomic data. And again, reiterating, when I listened to Committee Member Stoll, I echo his comments and with the community of interest as well that a lot of people have said. I think we're going down the right path. I think a precursor of having the the poll tonight was a good way to just get a pulse on where we are. But I think we still have a lot of work to do and understanding and listening to everyone's input to where we actually put the dots on the paper and decide which is the right place to go for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Reynolds. Do you have anyone else in District 4?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to Council District 2, Committee Members Romero and Baca.
Thank you all, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I just want to reiterate what was told to us at earlier meetings, that these maps are only concepts, and this is for the public's benefit, and to assure them that these are only starting points for our consideration. And they are meant to be provocative so as to get us talking. So nothing is cast in stone. I feel as if our work is only beginning. Thank you, Mr. Kellerman, for your comment. I really like that idea about the vulnerability and burden index and analyzing the socioeconomic data. I think that is telling on something that's concerning to me about performance in terms of a measurable of voting turnout. Of the maps, I think what's obvious is that the west side perhaps needs to shed some numbers. The one that seems to change things the least is to go across the river, observing the contiguity requirement north of Central. That doesn't seem to displace, to address Ms. Quesada's concerns, their incumbent. Map A seems to be the most mindful of that. I know there was strong sentiment expressed last time from all members as to not displace anyone. And I think that's a thoughtful thing to do. And I believe one of the May factors that we are to consider in our deliberations. Beyond that, being from the, downtown and urban core area, I think it is diverse and perhaps sometimes well served by as diverse interests as well. Maybe two members who have a stake or skin in the game, so to speak, in that core area, because I think that fundamentally, so goes the core, so goes the success and well-being of this city. Beyond that, the only other thing that I want to mention, and this speaks to communities of interest, in terms of preserving communities of interest, which I hugely observant of and important to me, I want to make sure that we're careful not to sort of create a collective of marginalized communities, pockets of poverty communities, for lack of a better word, in our desire to preserve communities of interest. I appreciate all the comment. I appreciate all the information that's presented, hugely helpful. And with that, I will pause. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Romero. Petra, did we get everyone?
Madam Chair, yes, that's everyone. So back to District 6 and yourself.
Thank you. I want to just reiterate that, this is not a them versus us process. It's a what's best for the entire city of Albuquerque. And so that's what we're looking for. And nothing that we have done today is prescriptive. We're not saying that anything that we're doing is cast in stone right now, but we do need to get a pulse about where we are, so how we can determine where we need to go next with our discussions. We can't really know much. This meeting, is sort of just going over what we talked about in meeting number 2, and maybe we could have handled it with an email. However, next time when we get district R, somebody's going to have to help me say that right. I always say it like, is it district R, district R? How do you say it? And we use that in the statewide process. It was very, very beneficial, especially for Black communities who had not been a part of that process in the past. It's really impactful for us to be able to say, you know, we're trying to maintain communities of interest, and the census was a disaster for in 2020, and we know that we're basing all of this on 2020 data, and there was historic undercounts, but this is what we have to live with for the next 10 years. And so we hope that what we do here is going to set the tone for how we handle 2030. I haven't heard a lot of talk about minority voting rights, and so I'm going to be looking at that as one of the principles of redistricting, and how we might make sure that there is one person, one vote, and that people have equal access to this process. That said, I know that we have a lot of work to do. And again, we want to assure the public that this is an open and transparent process, and we don't have any desire to sort of say we're done and we're closing up shop and going home. We want to hear from the public, which is why we like you to go to the website, take a look at it, tell us what is missing, what is not there, and we will make sure that it does get included. We want to reiterate that District R is going to be available, we think, on the 18th, and our next meeting is going to be on the 23rd. So there should be at least some time for people to be able to go and work on some of those concept maps. Also, the shape file should be up on the website tomorrow. We'll say before close of business tomorrow. Thank you to Research and Polling for giving us that information. I have that it is 6:47. I would like to go back perhaps and pick up on just some questions that we had from committee members, particularly Member Kellerman and Member Romero, that talks about the socioeconomic data, voter behavior and performance, and concentrations of wealth. And so I would like to see if there's someone from Research and Polling who could speak to the fact of, you know, how we might solve for some of those issues. And if we could have a bit of discussion about that, I think it would be appropriate before we continue on. I don't think we have anything else on the agenda.
Madam Chair, just before we go into that, I do want to make sure that everyone is clear that the next meeting is the 27th. It'll be
the 27th. I'm sorry.
Yes, no, that's okay. So we'll have, the district website should be up no later than the 18th. So there should be at a minimum 10 days for the public to use district to create some maps prior to the next meeting and submit them to us.
So is District R or District R, is it like potato? Do we get to say it any way we want?
I think it should be yes. Tomato.
Okay, great, thank you. So Research and Polling, if you guys could sound off on that question from I think both Member Romero and Member Kellerman, and if one of you want to restate it and then have Research and Polling respond, that'd be great.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to restate the 2 new layers or the requests for new maps and new concepts. First of all, what would it look like to have a more equal distribution of population within districts based on the vulnerability index? To the best of the ability, how can we assign a number to current districts? And then for each of the concepts, what would it look like to iterate them with that layer? So have, much like we looked at population shifts and variance, what would it look like to show vulnerability equality, if you will? So a more equal distribution of vulnerability. And I'm interested in thoughts there, and I'm on standby to talk through that. The other portion of that was maintaining communities of interest while we redistribute or equalize the vulnerability distribution. And with those 2 points, I turn it to research and polling for their initial thoughts. Thanks.
And right before you research and polling answers, we want to be realistic about scope of work for the contract. And so please let us know the complexity of doing such a thing and what effect it would have on your scope of work.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and Member Kellerman. So we've been talking about ways to sort of assign a number that way. I think what we want to try to do is to do sort of a frequency count of tracks within the district at the different sort of levels of socioeconomic vulnerability. Again, I want to remind us all that the problem that we're going to have is that these tracks cross district boundaries, no matter how the districts are drawn. So I think what we're going to try to do is use satellite imagery to sort of figure out, for a tract that crosses 2 districts, where do the majority of the people live, and just sort of, make some judgment calls about which tract to count, which district to count which tract in, and to try to get us a number. So it's going to be messy and it's going to be noisy, but we hopefully will be able to do some of that sort of within district comparisons. And we're happy to try to draw a conceptual map that does start to unpack sort of those wealthier areas and those more vulnerable areas and sort of equalize them. I do want to note that that there is going to be some real tension between communities of interest and equalizing the sort of wealth and vulnerability across the city. And so we'll just look at it and see what it looks like and continue to talk about where we should prioritize what things. And Brian, I don't know if you had something to add to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Brittany, Member Kellerman. The thing I was going to focus on was the second half of what you focused on. So let me just present that because it's a very important issue. And I can even give an example or two so that the committee can ponder it. So we heard from many members speak about the importance of maintaining and keeping communities intact. And I think a lot of these maps do that, but we also, as one member said, had provocative maps also to engage in debate. But even in the more provocative maps that change things, like a Foothills Tramway, Four Hills district, it was done still with the mindset of an argument that could be made on a communities of interest. So on the notion of splitting concentrations of wealth or equalizing the distribution of vulnerability, so let's give an example of that. If we can put up any concept, Brittany, perhaps concept A. So as you know, the state held community sessions, 16 of them over the course of many months. And one of the things that we heard was keep the international district intact, because many citizens within the international district said, well, we would like to elect somebody who looks like us. We'd like to elect somebody who cares about our concerns. And so the international districts, roughly San Mateo to Wyoming and Lomas to Gibson. Now, there were a few people who said, well, but if we split it, perhaps we could have 2 voices that would represent us in Santa Fe. So that's a debate. So let's say we wanted to split the concentrations of wealth and equalize the distribution of vulnerability. Well, one could take half the international district and move it into a district that's more higher socioeconomic status, put it with Four Hills, or put it with District 7 and split the international district in half, then you'd have a debate between people saying, no, keep it intact. Let's elect someone who looks like us, who shares our concerns, so that we could actually elect someone even though we have lower voter participation levels. Or we can divide ourselves in two and maybe get 2 voices, maybe get no voices, maybe get 1 voice. There are pockets of poverty in District 3. Most of the South Valley is outside the city of Albuquerque, but a lot of it is concentrated in that Westgate area. There are pockets of poverty there. There are also pockets of poverty between Central and I-40. If one were to take the Westgate area and include it with Ladera, one could distribute the concentrations of wealth or redistribute poverty. Then you'd have a debate about whether you're taking a community of interest in the Westgate South Valley area and splitting it up. So, and Member Kellerman even recognized the challenges that we would face to both, and Brittany did as well, of the tensions between breaking up concentrations or wealth or redistributing pockets of poverty or vulnerability areas and putting it with an area of a different socioeconomic status. So that's what I wanted to just say, that there are tensions between those things.
Thank you very much. I do just want to say that always when we are having these discussions, there's the underlying belief that it is a given that people who are poor don't vote. And there are those sort of privileged conversations about what a pocket of poverty means and, you know, will it make my life better or the lives of someone else better who lives in District 6 if we pair them with people who live in Fort Hills. And from my vantage, that remains to be seen. And also perhaps the work is to convince people that there's a reason to vote. Member Kellerman or Member Romero, did you all have any follow-up remarks?
Chair McGill, I appreciate that. Your last comment, especially that correlation, it's a theory and it can easily be hijacked to excuse unequal representation, actually. So it can be weaponized against what I feel is the actual intent, which is to encourage more engagement. So that's beyond the scope of this committee, to increase voter turnout. I think maybe that's part of the reason, or at least related to the fact that we can't consider election data in what we do. I think it's unfortunate, though, that if we're trying to come back to a principle of one person, one vote, that we can't consider who actually votes. And when we look at city council elections, how small portions of districts usually end up electing the representative for that district or the counselor for that district. So this is a first step, I think, and what Brian and you spoke to, and thank you for walking through those scenarios. Brittany, you as well. Michael, just how we're taking this first step with more data, with more maps, and really looking at this foundational layer. So rather than jumping to an assumption that we simply have to look at population shifts between the sides of the river, let's look at the core foundational principles here, the foundational data layers that haven't been considered before, and what would it look like to have high impact maps, even more provocative maps. Let's consider the full universe before we decide on a set of concepts to narrow down in. And I know that is more work. Chair, I appreciate you bringing up the contract and the scope here, if that's possible, but I do think it's very important. And frankly, it's critical if we want to look at equality in the city going forward. We may not discover what we expect or assume at this stage. And I'm happy to admit that there may not be correlations. We may want to fall back on one of the initial concepts as we go, but the first step here in dialogue is really considering the full universe. And I appreciate this first step. So what's been proposed, I think that'll really get us to that point. And the next meeting, we can really look further at what would it look like to have this frequency count and to try to reimagine the city based on this distribution. Also, I wanted to note that it's very different to look at concentrations of poverty versus concentrations of wealth. And if we look at breaking up concentrations of wealth, which frankly do not represent communities of interest in the city, what does that look like and how would that change the map? So that's the sort of final step I would add, is coming at it from a different angle in what we're redistributing and what that means for representation in the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Kellerman. Does anyone else have any comments on those remarks? I don't see any hands raised. I would like to ask a question of the committee, and if people can weigh in to figure out, are you hearing from members of your the district that you are representing related to feedback that they might be giving you on this process? And if not, why do you think that is? And how might we increase the numbers of members of the public that we have who are interested in this process? I'd be open to comments on anything that you all think that we can do differently to make sure that we have more public involvement. And looks like Sharice, member Sharice Casada, your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last night I attended the Southwest Alliance of Neighbors, also known as SWAN, and to educate our members on this process. Many of them were unaware that this was even occurring. I gave them the link. I asked them to please take a look at it, look at our past meetings. There's links to, there's video links for past meetings that they can watch. And I really just implore them to get involved, attend, sign up for public comment, submit maps whenever that tool becomes available. And I was wondering if there's any chance we could provide public education at some of these neighborhood association meetings and coalition meetings, because, you know, the average person, it really isn't following this, I want to say. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful or anything like that. I just feel that, you know, people are busy with their lives, work, children, whatnot. And I just really would like to make an effort on our part to really get the word out about this process.
Thank you, Member Casada. I agree. And are there other member comments related to how we make this a relatable process for members of the public? What else do we need to do? Are you hearing from people? Is there something that we can do to make sure that more people get the information? Member Pasco, I see your hand raised.
Okay, so I haven't heard from anybody really at all. And so I wonder if there's a way that there's a way that the public could contact us via the website, because that's the one thing that's sort of easily out there. If you know anything about redistricting, you can find the website. But I don't know, I'm not aware of any way that somebody could say, oh, Ken Pasco's on the district, I'll just go contact him.
Staff?
Madam Chair, we have not put private email addresses onto the website, because we generally tend to assume that folks are signing up to serve on a committee and not necessarily have outreach. We do have all the names on the website, so if somebody knows who, for example, Committee Member Pasco is, they could reach out. But if that is something that you guys would like, is to have an email address on there so that people can contact you directly, that's certainly something we can consider doing. The main way at the moment is we've got the form on there that goes on, and and that's what we send to you as the public comments on the Tuesday. I got it. So that you've got it. Oh, good. And so that's really kind of You guys is
Petra, it's fine. You know, we are going to need to meet your son before we end today. But Member Hernandez, you had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you know, I think this process, just like many other ideals, you know, really comes down to outreach, communication, and training. And one of the things that I found here in the work that I get to do here in our district is that you know, our constituents, just like Member Quesada mentioned, are busy with their lives, and you know, a lot of times they don't know that they can participate in these processes. And I really feel strongly that you know, it circles back to a real strong outreach and communication, then providing that training to them so that they know exactly you know, how to participate in this process. And so you know, my question is are you engaging with community organizations outside of the neighborhood associations that could potentially help with that outreach, you know, or with communications, or even provide training as we move along, so that they know exactly how to participate in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hernandez. Member Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just did a quick Google search of City of Albuquerque Redistricting 2022. Nothing comes up. The public doesn't know we're even having this meeting. KOAT is a guest, is on the webinar, so perhaps they've gotten some interest, but I don't think that the city has done nearly enough to even tell the public. Like, we're talking about training the public. The public doesn't even know that this is happening. There's, you know, it doesn't do us any good to put, you know, contact information for individual members on the website, because the public isn't going to the City of Albuquerque website just searching for redistricting. So I would really, if we really want to see a more see better attendance and participation for members of the public, we can't expect people to show up at a party we don't send them invitations to. So I would just really encourage us to use the media and get the word out about the process. We're almost halfway done and we haven't even told anyone we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Latham. I did ask the city to put together a media advisory prior to the next meeting to see if we can gather some interest and request perhaps some interviews from panelists. There are 18 of us on the committee, both the voting members and alternates. And I guess I would ask from us, have we been, city staff, have you all provided us with any materials that we can put on our own social media? Some banners to say the redistricting process is happening, that, you know, we can use our reach and influence. I'm assuming that everybody is on social media, or you've got some email contacts. And so I guess I'd like to know from the committee members, if we can ask that we start with ourselves and say that we will help complement the work of the city to get the word out. You know, can we agree that that's something that we this afternoon or this evening or tomorrow, if we're provided with some materials to put out on our social media, that we might do that. I'm thinking from the communication staff that if we have some sort of social media kit that we can post information about this process, that we can start to make it more relatable for the public. And I would request that we do that to beef up that communication plan so that we can make sure that we are getting more people who, you know, they probably are not that interested right now in understand, you know, in listening to the definition of compactness, to be quite frank. We need to tell them how it relates to their personal lives. So
Madam Chair,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but yeah, I will draft up some like social media kits, like you said, and to share with the committee members to share in their own personal networks.
Thank you. I think we can start there. You know, that's not going to be enough, but we can definitely start there. I'm sure all of us know a few people. Let's get the few people that we know to get involved. And hoping that everybody was like, yes, we're going to do that. Please let me know if we're going to do it. All right. You know, we did want to do a follow-up poll with attendees that are still present with us. Some people have gone on to the rest of their evening, and all of our panelists, I think, are still here. So I want to do a follow-up just to find out, based on the discussion that we've had from the time we did the initial poll to now, where we might be. And we have with a community member suggestion, and I want the community members to see, we respond to your suggestions. We have a none of the above option on here. Of the 5 concepts currently drafted, which is your preferred concept? You have a single choice, and if everybody would just please weigh in again in this straw poll. This is not saying that this is what we're going to do, but we just want to get a reading on where we are, what work we still have to do. Julian, let me know how people are doing with their responses. This is for members of the community as well to respond.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we already got a couple more responses from the first poll, and it's looking like the responses are slowing down. We'll give everyone another couple seconds here to send their response, and then I will share the results.
Thank you. We are, as soon as we get these results, if there is anything else that someone would like to bring up based on what we've talked about today, I feel like we've had a really good meeting and a robust conversation. I'm looking forward to April 27th at 5:30, when members of the public will have had an opportunity to go to district or to maybe help to give us some more provocative concept maps. That would really be great. And it looks like, you know, we are about where we were, maybe a little bit different from the very first straw poll that we did at the beginning of the meeting. This is just for your information, and it will be a part of the record of the minutes so people can see it and they'll be able to track it as the process continues. It is 7:12. I know we're slated to go to 7:30. I don't know if anybody would be really upset if we ended a few minutes early. And if there are no other comments, and I don't see any hands raised, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Member Quesada has moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have several seconds. Member Romero and Segura. All in favor, can we just say yes? Let's go home.
Aye, yes.
Yes.
I appreciate your support. We were going to be waiting, Julian, for that social media information so that we can be the change that we seek and help the city of Albuquerque with getting more people there. KOAT, if you're listening, please tell the public about the fact that redistricting is happening and we want everyone's input. I thank you for being here with us this evening. And if there's nothing else, we will go home and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.